www.thegreatwhitebrotherhood.org.
DNA. The connection between DNA and higher self is not quite as was imagined and described. Our higher self is a purely spiritual force that will never be made manifest in the physical plane, referred to as Earth. It must be realized that the 3D world that one observes is not actually a real construct in a solid sense. It is an imaginary world that our collective minds construct in order for us to have a base to incarnate to. But it is imaginary. However, our higher self, although invisible, is real. So, in a way, what we experience is topsy-turvy. Most people think that the higher self is imaginary, but that 3D is real. In fact, life is the other way around. Higher self is real, even if invisible, whereas 3D is a figment of our imagination, even though it appears solid. This being so, the DNA that we can measure in 3D must also be a figment of our imagination, though appears real and measurable. DNA does not stop with a sample of blood or tissue. It too has auras, just like everything else. These auras go to ever higher planes of reality, so that, at the highest level, the DNA of a person is of very much the same vibration as the higher self. But it is not connected to higher self, as higher self is real, whereas DNA is imaginary. DNA exists in order to give each person, animal, plant, rock, planet, galaxy, an identity in the 3D world, perceived as solid. In the spiritual world, DNA does not exist. So, it is important to understand that everything physical has DNA, but that DNA is there to give each object, no matter what it is in the physical plane, a unique identity, a sort of calling card, despite it being made of flesh, vegetable matter, or stone. All is vibration, so all is the same. A person or a rock are basically the same, as they are made of similar vibration. It is the DNA that helps differentiate people from stones. Also, as you know, through DNA, each person has a unique identity, and each rock or stone has a unique identity. Every grain of sand on a beach has a unique identity. Jesus understood this when he mentioned that every feather of a bird was known to God. He was talking about the identity that DNA gives. Once an incarnation is finished, the physical form is finished, and the DNA is no longer required. In the heavenly spheres, individualization is no longer required. Life comes together in unity, and division is finished. So, the higher self has a task, which is to direct the spiritual aspect of life, as it progresses towards perfection, whereas DNA has the function of telling each cell of the body what it is. It was mentioned in another talk, that at the time of creation of an object, the directors of life put a stamp, a logos, on the Spirit of God, that tells it what it is destined to be. At that moment, if the object is destined to have a 3D existence, the beginnings of its DNA, at the highest level, is created, which will, eventually, form a visible object on Earth, each one of which, from the tiniest grain of sand, to the whole galaxy, has a unique identity. In fact, one could say, that each atom has DNA, and each atom has a unique identity. It is true that the higher self is the God Spirit, and it is also true, that there is only one God Spirit, and thus, there is only one higher self. As there is only one God Spirit, it implies that the God Spirit, higher self, of a grain of sand, a galaxy, or us, is the one and same God Spirit. Thus, the higher self of us humans, and everything else, is the same one higher self. But, it is clear that there is a marked difference between a human, a grain of sand, and a galaxy. This is where DNA comes in. If man had the ability to quantify DNA sufficiently, he would find out that not only mammals and insects have DNA, but rocks, stones, sand, earth, and every other thing, has DNA, as all is one. But, it is noticed that, not only is the DNA of a human different from that of a horse, a pig, a dog, and so on, but because, just to think about humans, each human has a sense of individuality, a spiritual attribute, that creates, in the DNA, two parts. Part 1 is the sequencing that denotes a human, but Part 2 contains, amongst other things, the individual sequence, applicable to each person. The same would, of course, apply to everything incarnate in the galaxy, that has individual awareness. So, there is only one God Spirit, higher self, for all things, but, for all things incarnate, there is DNA, that denotes the species. For all things that have a sense of individuality, there is more DNA, that denotes that individual.
Thank you for watching this video lesson. Please visit www.thegreatwhitebrotherhood.org for more lessons and free downloadable books.